Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 17th of September, comes to you from London. And just a reminder that the setup that I have here, this is Updata Analytics. The setup that I have here is my long-term weekly chart, my 1% point and figure chart log scale, my daily chart, which is my medium term, and then my 0.5% point and figure chart, and then my 60-minute chart and a 60-minute point and figure chart. So what I'm looking at here is a long term, a medium term, and a short term picture. So very quickly, with these 6 charts, I can get just an overall picture of what's happening on the long term, the medium term, and the short term. These are Ichimoku cloud charts, and if you look at our course on Ichimoku, you can understand these. But basically, if the blue line is above the cloud, we're in bullish mode. If it's below, we're in bearish. So that's how I quickly establish what trends we're in, and then I look at these upside targets. So I'm looking here at the dollar index. The dollar is bullish on the weekly, bullish on the daily, and bullish short term as we've just come back through the cloud. So that gives us a picture that we're bullish on all 3 time frames for the dollar index. So dollar looking bullish. We've got good upside targets here, some 2 and 4.5% away. So and then the longer term target, some 14% and a massive 60% upside target for the dollar. But ultimately, I'm looking at just this overall picture to get a view. So the dollar is looking bullish. If I look at the Eurodollar, that is therefore bearish. We're below the cloud on the weekly, the daily, and the 60 minutes, so we're bearish here with lots of downside targets, especially here on the short-term chart. We've got downside potential of a further 2% lower. So that just tells us that short-term, i.e. in the next few days, we shouldn't be surprised to see the euro falling lower still. The Japanese yen, we're seeing here, we're bullish on the dollar, so we're bullish above the cloud, and the yen is normally a good lead indicator for the dollar, so we're seeing the dollar bullish. That means we probably will see some dollar strength over the coming couple of days. Sterling has been stronger against the dollar. We're bullish above the cloud here. We had a very strong rise off this low point at the 120 level at the start of this month, and we're just now seeing sterling starting to fall back. We do have long-term downside targets for sterling which are bearish, and so that of course is pricing in some Brexit fear, if you like. We do have short-term upside targets though against the euro. We've got 114, 116, 115, so it does suggest that that sterling will go higher against the euro. So we're seeing that there, but at the moment, sterling looking stronger against the euro. Long term, we've still got a little bit of work to do. Taking a look against the Swiss franc, we see here that sterling is also looking stronger here on the short-term chart. Bitcoin, we're sitting above the $10,000 level. Long term, we're still just struggling to get through the cloud. Medium term, we're also just struggling, and short term, we're slightly bearish. So for the moment, the outlook for Bitcoin is a little bit bearish. We're waiting for the breakout there. Looking at the S&P 500 index, overnight, we're up 0.3%, and that's edging higher all the time, coming back to test this July high. So looking good for a breakout. We've got good upside targets here, 4.5% on the short-term chart, and much more on the medium and longer term charts. The Nasdaq also just looking strong, and again good medium upside targets, one there of 6% on the short-term chart. And looking at the Dow Jones Index, only about 3% upside here on the short-term chart. We've got one here of 8% actually, and we are just also in that bullish mode, not quite breaking to new highs yet, so quite key there. The Russell 2000 index we're seeing is also looking strong. It was bucking the trend last night, outperforming the larger caps, so that was quite key. The futures today, little changed on the S&P futures, slightly down, and the Nasdaq E-mini also slightly down, but the change is not big enough for us to call which way the market will open, so our call today is that the market will open flat. Looking at the UK market, we're also fairly flat this morning, up only up 0.16%, and the 250 is actually down by 0.3%. Interestingly, we're seeing here this bullish trend on the Footsie 250 above the cloud here, just showing on the 60-minute chart how this trend over the last few weeks has just been consistently bullish, and that shows up in the daily chart there as that move there, and we're just starting to come out of the cloud on the long term. So midcaps in the UK starting to look quite good. The DAX down slightly this morning, so again little change, but it's also marching up the hill and looking better on that long-term chart. And the CAC Courant also pushing to multi-year highs. Japan was up by 0.27% overnight, so it's looking strong. It's had a very strong September. Not enough on the long-term chart to turn us bullish, but we are seeing here on the short term a little bit of a shortage of upside targets. It does make Tokyo quite hard to call in the short term. Hang Seng in Hong Kong was actually down 1.4%. Its woes continue, although it is still bullish above the trend on the short term. The medium and long-term charts are not looking good, and the Chinese market down by 1.7%. Also just struggling on these medium and long-term charts. The short-term chart here is actually still holding on to its bullishness. The Sensex has really been underperforming the last few months. We see that here showing up in the long-term chart, and the medium-term chart we're below the cloud, and on the short-term chart we're also just bearish there. The S&P 200 index, the Aussie market, actually has held up, and it is bullish in all three time frames with good upside targets. Brent crude, of course, was the big story yesterday, up 13% on the attacks on the Saudi installations. We're seeing here that today it's just steady. It's down 0.5%. So it's what we do from here now. Will we go higher, confirming this thrust, or will we go lower? We did pull back yesterday, activating a downside target back to $66, but at the moment we're just holding on to that transition where we're looking bullish on that medium-term chart now. A few days holding at these levels, and we'd be into medium-term bullish for crude oil. The same with WTI. It's down 1% this morning, but again, it's into that medium-term bullish territory now. US Nat Gas sitting at $2.68. Its main thing is this medium-term transition on the daily cloud. The short-term 60-minute chart is actually looking pretty good as well. Taking a look at gold. Gold is actually back below the $1,500 level, pushing us into just nudging bearish territory there on the short-term chart. We've got a few downside targets. We are finding support here on the point and figure chart, and of course we do have these long-term upside targets for gold. Gold has had an incredible run this year, and we're seeing that still showing through. And silver up 2.3%, actually looking a bit better than gold, but still bearish below the cloud on that short-term chart. US 10-year yields, we've seen the bond yield really rising here. We're holding on to that short-term trend. So we've seen the low point of 1.5% over in the 10-year yield, and we're pushing back towards that 2% mark. We've got a target there at the moment. If we can break higher and activate this target, we've got quite significant upside potential for gold, so for US 10-year yields. And if we look at German bond yields, German bond prices, we see how the bond price has collapsed, meaning the yields are going up. This is all this data coming from Thomson Reuters Icon, or if you're using Metastock, coming from Metastock as well. Here we see the data now coming from Yahoo Finance, and here I'm just looking at my weekly, my daily, and also daily, because I tend not to have 60-minute data coming in from Yahoo. And here we see the chart relative to the Dow Jones Index. So we start by looking at the Dow 30. The best performer, just click on the percentage change. Chevron was the best performer yesterday. No surprises there with that rise in the oil price. Still not performing great on the relative, but looking like Chevron might be poised for a break. On the downside for the Dow, the worst performer was Procter & Gamble. They were down 2.4%. The trend on Procter & Gamble has been really quite amazing though for the last year, and that's still looking pretty good, outperforming the Dow significantly this year. The Nasdaq 100, if we look at here, we've got Workday. They're up 3.2%, so looking pretty strong there. On the downside, we see here we had American Airlines, Dollar Tree, quite a few. Amazon actually down 1.7%, so they were hit yesterday. Still holding on to their bullish long-term trend, but medium-term just starting to come under pressure for Amazon. Taking a look now at the Aussie market, the best performer there was Focus Group. They're up 4.6%. going through a long-term transition here, as we're seeing on the chart. And if we look at the downside, we had Ramsay Health Care Limited. They were down 4.6%, and that is still just falling, having gone through that cloud on the daily. In the Indian market now, taking a look here, we've got Gale India there up quite strongly, but the chart's still looking very bearish, down 30% versus the Dow this year. And if we look at Hero Motor Corp, they were the worst performer yesterday, down 3.4%. So taking a look now at the European market, we start by looking at the Footsie 100 index. We've got Hikma Pharmaceuticals. They're down up 1.9%, the best performer in the UK top 100. Severn Trent up 1.8%. And then on the downside, we've got Carnival Corporation. There we see the live pricing coming in from Yahoo Finance. And this chart just starting to try and get above the cloud, but then falling away again this morning, down 3%. Looking at the 250 now in the UK, we've got Sophos Group. They're up nearly 3%, and Premier Oil, their rise continues off the back of that oil price rise yesterday, looking much better on that medium-term chart now. Taking a look at the downside, we had Sirius Minerals. They're down a massive fall this morning, and Aston Martin, their woes continue, down 2.3%. Last of all, we take a look at European stocks, the top 50 in Europe. Total continues to be the riser there on the back of the oil price rise that we saw yesterday, up 1.6%. No surprise to see the energy companies there. And on the downside, we've got Adidas Group down 1.5%. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.